hold on to. Us all. Help us to be focused on what we would call the common good, the good of everyone around us. Help us to learn from Ralph in that. Let no one leave this sacred space the same as when they arrived this afternoon. Speak to us through the tributes, through song, through all the pieces. God, do that work, we pray. For the world needs more Ralph Munro in it. Maybe now more than ever. Help us in a way that we find natural to divide, to supernaturally unite in this building and in all the places where our community decisions are made. God, guide us as we leave through this time. Be with every speaker. Be with us all as we move from here out into your beautiful world. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
Feel free to follow along in your program as we hear from those who honor Ralph's many contributions to our state and its people.
Good afternoon, good people. May I introduce my chairman, Chris Peters, from Squaxin Island Tribe of the Medicine Creek Nation.
To all of you, my honorable people, honorable friends, honorable relations. My name is Chris Peters, and I have the honor of serving the Squaxin people as their council chair and the honor to be here today. What some of you don't know is that Ralph Munro is forever connected to our people, and he's forever honored by our people. When I got to know Ralph, he spent a lot of time at our reservation walking around the tribal center and our museum, and was always good for a big smile and a conversation. And he realized there's a couple things in common with me. One is I'm half Scottish, and that was a big deal. My brother has red hair, and so he's trying to put that together. And so once he found out I was half Scottish, he was like, there's a lot of similarities between the Scottish clans and the Indigenous clans. He kept saying, you got to come to one of these Scottish games. I never did, so one of these days I will, in honor of him. I'll definitely do that. I also graduated with his son, George, class of 95, go Capital. And I also grew up on Eld Inlet. From my parents' dock, I can see the Munro property. It'll always be the Munro property to me. And I am now honored to be able to still live on Eld Inlet, and I can still see the Munro property. Which brings us to why we're connected. There was a discovery of a dig site on that property. A dig site that my ancestors, my bloodline, what we call the Squayato or Squaith people, lived there for thousands of years on that peninsula, stewarding and being connected to the land and the waters. And we will never, ever forget the graciousness of Ralph Munro and his family and the honor of which he brought our people in and the way he cared for us and cared for our culture. It was amazing and truly honorable. And for that, he'll forever be connected with us. In fact, I call him Squaxadubs. He is Squaith. He is forever our Tsiaya, our relations, as we call him. And I'm so honored to know him, and he will forever be honored by the Squaxin people for the way that he has treated us and become our friend. So thank you for allowing us to come and speak. I'm going to turn it back over to Charlene Kreis, our friend and our museum director. Hands are raised to all of you. Good to see you, George.
First time I ever met Ralph, I was at a meeting, a cultural resources meeting, and in walks this tall man, and we're all looking at him, but that was okay. But later on, he came to us, and I'm sitting with one of our friends, Margaret Seymour, she's a tribal member, and he had such a good personality. You could sense it immediately that this man was unique, where he cared, and it wasn't like, it wasn't put on, it was real. And from that moment forward, I've always remembered Ralph, and Ralph has been a strong supporter of Indigenous people. My people have lived here for thousands of years. Some of the earliest artifacts have been dated 13,000 years. We are an ancient people. And Ralph showed respect to our language, to our history. Of course, on his site where the artifacts were found, I was walking with him one time on the dirt road, the road to the dig site, and he said, "Charlene, there's times when I'm walking this and I sense, I can feel your people." And I look at him, and it meant a lot to hear that. And he said, "You know, if I said that to some people, they would think I was crazy." And I said, "Ralph, I don't think you're crazy. I know your spirit is strong, and you love people, and that's the greatest commandment ever given to us, that we love one another." Ralph exemplified that. He loved everybody. It didn't matter what color of skin or what economic status we came from. He cared. And we were so blessed as a people to have him among us. I will raise my hands to you, and this in a Salish way is to say thank you. And I know many of you here, you are here to honor him, and he is an honorable man. Today, I gotta share, I kept thinking, I heard Ralph, and I could hear his laughter. It wasn't him, it was his son, George. So it's so good we still have part of Ralph with us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. In case you're wondering if this is Big Bird, I'm not. My name is Ezra Teshomi. I'm a Rotarian, past district governor. I'm someone who has taken Ralph to Ethiopia and East Africa for the past 15 years. This afternoon, I would like to honor Ralph for the privilege of working with him, saving so many lives. Ralph is a passionate humanitarian, a tireless champion for the voiceless. Ralph was more than a longtime member of Rotary and past president of Seattle No. 4. He was a leader with a vision, a man of deep empathy, and someone who lived the Rotary motto, which is service above self. I got to witness Ralph's commitment to eradicating polio firsthand on one of many humanitarian trips to East Africa. His commitment to eradicating polio was not just about Rotary, it was personal to him. For over 15 years, Ralph traveled to Ethiopia and Uganda, not as a tourist, but as a humanitarian, walking into remote areas, remote villages, hut to hut, village to village, administering 2 drops of polio so children will live without a fear of being crippled from polio. He didn't go for recognition. He went because he believed no child should be left behind and crippled from polio for the lack of the 2 drops we administer. Ralph also brought lightness to our trip, sharing stories, always guiding and telling us what to do, what to wear. As a matter of fact, what I'm wearing is what Ralph gave me. And he made me the commander-in-chief of East Africa polio eradication. And Ralph passed out hats that read polio warrior. And he also, as a politician, is good in passing buttons like this and says, "I'm lost, I'm with Ralph. I'm not lost, I'm with Ezra." He's always leading, loving, and caring. He saw the need, he would find solution. I remember one day in Ethiopia, we entered a small poor hut. Inside were 4 little kids to be vaccinated. And as he looked around, Ralph saw 4 kids who were malnourished. Their tummy was bulging. Ralph looked around and visibly emotional. He turned to me and said, "What good does it do to vaccinate these children if we don't feed them?" And then he asked me, "How much would it take to feed this family?" Before I could respond, he pulled his wallet and gave $100 to the health worker, said, "I want you to go and buy food for this family, and from here on, I'll also send money for them to be fed." So that's Ralph. He would find a solution. He didn't just care, he acted. He didn't just see suffering, he did something about it. Another moment I'll never forget happened in Gulu, Uganda. We were staying at a modest hotel in a remote village. Early the next morning, Ralph got up to take a shower. I usually, knowing some of the problems, I get up very early, take a shower and run. But Ralph got up, he went in to take a shower, turned the faucet on. There was 1 drop of water. He waited and waited, no water came out. And then in the afternoon, we went to the village to visit a birthing clinic. And he said, "I realize what water means to everybody here because that clinic didn't have any water." He said, "Because of my experience this morning, I want to bring water well to this clinic." So Ralph helped to bring water to that clinic. And there was a child that was born that day when he was there. And that mother named that child after Ralph. George, there is a Ralph who is now 14 years old in Uganda, named after Ralph. Yeah, Ralph's compassion didn't end in Africa. Here, he became a fierce advocate working alongside key global partners like the Gates Foundation and lobbying Congress in Washington, D.C. to make sure that funding will carry on for the polio eradication. I've gone to Washington, D.C. with him to lobby our senators. And he understood that polio eradication requires both compassion and policy. He urged lawmakers, foundations, and everyone to stay committed because ending polio is a must. Thanks to the leaders like Ralph, we have seen remarkable progress. In the year 2020, the continent of Africa was declared as a polio-free continent. That's huge. Ralph Munro was a statesman, a servant leader, and a Rotarian to his core. He didn't just give speeches, he gave himself up. He didn't just talk about change, he made the change. He didn't just serve, he transformed lives. His legacy lives on in the children who walk and play polio-free, in the mothers who draw clean water from the village wells, and in those of us who are lucky enough to serve besides him. We will miss Ralph and his energy and his humor, his generosity, and his fierce sense of justice. But his spirit lives on in every drop, in every well, in every child saved in East Africa and the rest part of Africa. As Ralph reminds us, we're this close to eradicating polio. And Bill Gates once said, quote, "Polio can be the second disease ever eradicated from the face of the earth, but only if we keep up the fight," end of quote. Ralph never stopped fighting. May we carry forward his legacy with courage, compassion, and with a heart open to the world. Ralph, thank you for all that you have done. Rest in peace, my friend. Thank you.
Xin chào quý vị. Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Ton Tan, and I am an Olympia native, Capitol High School, class of 2000. The last time I stood here in this rotunda, I was 18 years old and could not wait to leave Washington State. I left for 12 years, and then I came back, and when I came back, I got to be closer to my family, and my perspective had changed. I grew up here very much wanting to just be like my American friends, because I am a child of Vietnamese boat refugees. And as I stand here right now, it really dawns on me how much I owe my own origin story. I am one Vietnamese American, but one of more than 100,000 Washingtonians of Vietnamese and Southeast Asian descent. And I'm standing here because you, the people of Washington, welcomed us at a time when no one else wanted us. And I think we have all heard the famous story of how Governor Dan Evans was the first governor in the United States to welcome Vietnamese refugees when the Vietnam War ended on April 30th of 1975. About 130,000 refugees, people, parolees at the time, were evacuated from Vietnam and brought to military bases around the country. And Governor Evans and his administration, which included many people who had similar injustices, had similar trauma in their past, had that lived experience, who felt a compassion and a sense of empathy for these evacuees. Where could we go? And it was one thing to want to help, but it was Ralph Munro, who was then a young aide to Governor Evans, who really was his eyes and ears. Go down to San Diego, go to Camp Pendleton, take a look with your own eyes and tell me what is happening. And he did, and he took photos. And about 10 years ago, in 2015, I was a journalist with the Seattle Times, wanted to learn more about this story that I had just heard in bits and pieces from my family. And I called former Secretary of State Munro, and he said, meet me at the archives. I will show you, and I will tell you. And so we did. We met at the archives here, and he brought out all of his old folders. He brought out Governor Evans' papers, and we sat in the archive, and we went through these photos, and he explained to me what he saw at that time. And I was so moved, and it was also really funny because we got to relive some of the pitfalls of trying to help. There were a lot of letters in there, letters of criticism from citizens of Washington who were like, we don't want them here. And there were letters from, I remember him sitting there and he kind of chuckled, and Secretary Munro, I asked, what are you looking at? And he said, well, here's a letter from somebody who was looking for a Vietnamese wife. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And he felt it was really important for younger generation. I was born here. I benefited from birthright citizenship. My parents were not citizens for many years. And he saw humanity in us. He was the one who came back and told Governor Evans, I believe that these are people who would be wonderful Washingtonians and have something to contribute to this state. And so with that, the first 500 Vietnamese were invited to resettle here and were brought to Camp Murray. And that did not include my family. But the reason why my family ended up escaping by boat, going to a refugee camp, and then being resettled here in Washington was because we had an uncle who had evacuated in 1975, who had actually been resettled in Indiana, but heard that Washington was the place to be if you were a refugee, and resettled here and came to Olympia. And that's how my father, when our family escaped, boat capsized, lost everything. He remembered the P.O. box for Olympia, Washington, and was able to get in touch with my uncle, who told us, I'll do everything I can to help bring you here. And I grew up knowing that he was the Secretary of State. I grew up knowing that Ralph Munro was a hero to our community. The community did things like try to raise funds to try to help build the Vietnam War Memorial. And so he was a giant, but he didn't really feel accessible to a young person like me. So I think in 2015, when he personally wanted to bring me into the archive and make sure that I remembered my community's origin story, it meant so much. And he didn't stop there. It's not like he just went in 1975, said, come here, and that was it. He stayed, he visited our community. He was a friend and an ally to our community for many, many, many years after that. And that's awesome. But then that's not all. In 2021, when Kabul fell, I found myself feeling the way that many other Vietnamese or descendants of Vietnamese refugees felt. We felt we had to do something. And we watched how there was another wave of people being evacuated from their homeland, not by choice, but out of necessity. And the first person I thought of was Ralph Munro. And so a group of us got together on a Zoom call, because this was during the pandemic, and I emailed Secretary Munro, and he said, I will join you. And so we had a Zoom call, and State Representative Milan Tai was there, State Senator Joe Nguyen was there, and here comes Ralph, having dinner, but he's like, I'm still gonna talk to you, I'm still gonna tell you what I know. Really just there to encourage us and to tell us, you know what's possible when community comes together, when churches come together, when state agencies come together. You know that we all have the power to do something to help these people. So do it. And I'm so grateful that we had his guidance at that time. And I miss him. And I feel that in this day and age, his legacy, it's up to us to carry on everything that he taught us. Do what you can with what you have from wherever you are. And it's okay to not be perfect and expect perfection. He didn't expect us to be perfect human beings, but just care for each other and just try. So George, thank you so much for letting our community have a space to speak and to honor Secretary of State Ralph Munro. We love him, and we love Washington. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you all very much for coming here to honor Ralph. Sunday, March 7th, 1976, was an unusually warm spring day in Olympia, and Ralph and I were heading out of the Olympia harbor on a friend's sailboat. 6 of us on board were looking forward to a relaxing, quiet afternoon. Then we saw a pod of orcas being chased by 2 large boats, a gill netter and a trawler. And there was a speedboat and a seaplane nearby. We realized it was the SeaWorld capture crew. Now, by 1976, 60 young orcas had been taken out of Washington waters and sold to marine parks overseas and all around the country. Some went to Australia, some went to Japan, some went to Texas, and people weren't really that aware of what was happening, I think. There wasn't too much publicity, and it just happened. But we didn't think what was going on was right. Bill Oliver, our boat's captain, tried to get his boat between the orcas and the capture boats, while the men yelled and threatened us, saying, "We have permits and we're legal, you blankety blanks." The orcas started to escape, but the seaplane taxied back and forth, and 2 men on the speedboat were lighting and then throwing seal bombs or explosives, small explosives, into the water to chase them. They drove the terrified animals into the shallow bay and threw nets around them. We were all very upset, but Ralph said, "We're not going to stop them. We need to focus and watch and remember everything these people do, because it may be important later." So we watched the horrible scene for a few hours, as the men separated the young orcas, which they wanted, from their family members, prodding them with long poles and screaming at them. The anguished cries of the orcas were heartbreaking, especially as mothers and calves were separated. The freed orcas did not leave. They kept circling the nets and continued to cry back and forth. We were all very depressed heading back to shore in the late afternoon, but Ralph and I decided that our best bet was to contact friends in the press. Early the next morning, Ralph picked up the Seattle PI newspaper, and he yelled, We've won round one. Mike Layton has just written a hell of a good story. Television crews came to Olympia and filmed the orcas in the nets. Soon it was a big news story, and crowds of protesters came to the harbor. SeaWorld's timing for this capture was quite bad, because Ralph was on the staff of Governor Dan Evans, and we were friends with Attorney General Slade Gorton. Ralph contacted Evans and Gorton, and they agreed that the situation should be investigated. Slade Gorton assigned 3 of his assistant AGs to study the SeaWorld permit. They found a key provision which had been violated. The orcas were to be allowed to swim naturally and not be forced to go in a certain direction. Also, the animals were to be treated humanely. Washington State filed suit against SeaWorld on March 10th, and both sides presented their cases at the federal courthouse in Seattle, with many observers watching anxiously. The 6 of us from the sailboat submitted affidavits about what we had witnessed, as did many people who lived on the shoreline between Tacoma and Olympia. They said they had seen a pod of orcas swimming fast ahead of 2 large boats and a speedboat which seemed to be chasing them. The legal arguments went on for several days, in and out of court. SeaWorld had an army of lawyers and public relations people there. At one point, it seemed that we had triumphed, but SeaWorld won an appeal, and the proceedings continued, with the orcas still in the nets in the Olympia harbor after about 10 days. However, the SeaWorld personnel were becoming concerned about their public image, and some negative information was coming out about previous captures, including the drowning of 4 young orcas, which they had tried to cover up. Finally, on March 23rd, SeaWorld signed an agreement that they would release the orcas and never again attempt to capture them in Washington waters. The courtroom erupted with joy. Ralph and I often talked about these events over the years and agreed that the capture and trial were among the most significant events of our lives. We met people who have become lifelong friends, and we tried to help their efforts to save the endangered southern resident pods and free tokitae from the Miami Seaquarium, which unfortunately didn't happen, but we tried. Sometimes the released captives were seen in the local waters. One female named Wake, and numbered T46, was seen often until 2 years ago. She is now deceased, but she has 27 descendants who would not have been born if SeaWorld had succeeded. On March 20th this year, the day Ralph passed away, Wake's granddaughter, T46B3, was first seen with her newborn calf. Ralph would have been very happy about that. Thank you.
By the way the land is laid, I think I'd be safe in saying we'll be home. From the prophets I've been hearing, I would say the end is near, for I see familiar landmarks all along. By the dreams that I've been dreaming, there will come a great redeeming, and over the next hill we'll be home. By the turn the tide is taking, I would say there's no mistaking that over the next hill we'll be home. There's a place that we are near that so many have been fearing, and over the next hill we'll be home. When we get there, we're all hoping that we find the gate is open, and there'll be a refuge from the coming storm. For the ways belong weary, but at last the end is nearing, and over the next hill we'll be home.
These are amazing stories, and I know that Ralph would want me to promote the office by telling you that you can actually pick up these stories. If you go to our website, you can purchase these books that talk about it. The low price is $34.50. You can get the story about the refugees coming over here. So thank you. Next up is Council General Iori. It is my honor to welcome you. He is going to present an award for Ralph Munro.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a great honor to join you this afternoon for these memorial services. I'm at Consul General of Japan in Seattle. I assumed this post October 2023. Before coming here, a former Consul General who have served here gave me a valuable piece of advice. If you ever face difficulty, turn to Mr. Ralph Munro. He'll know what to do. After my arrival, I hoped to meet him and reached out. Sadly, I learned he had taken ill. I waited, hoping for his recovery, but that day never came. Especially in these unpredictable political times, I had truly hoped to benefit from his wisdom and support. It remains one of my deepest regrets that I never had the chance to meet him. Beginning in 1981, Mr. Ralph Munro served as a Washington Secretary of State for nearly 2 decades. He worked tirelessly to strengthen ties with international partners, especially Japan, leading trade missions, promoting economic cooperation, and fostering regional partnerships. Through these efforts, he built lasting friendships with many Japanese leaders, including prime ministers. He was also a passionate supporter of the sister state partnership between Washington and Hyogo Prefecture, which marks its 60th anniversary in 2023. He chaired he chaired the 30th anniversary committee and remained involved through the 40s and 50s. He warmly welcomed Hyogo delegations, often hosting receptions at his home that left lasting impressions. His decades of public service laid the foundation for the vibrant exchange we enjoy today between Japan and the United States. The enduring partnership between Japan and Washington State owes much to his vision, generosity, and unwavering commitment. He is a statesman and diplomat in every sense of the word. Although the government of Japan announced his decoration in November 2022, Mr. Munro had already fallen ill. At his request, we postponed the ceremony in hopes of recovery. Sadly, he passed away earlier this year. Thanks to the leadership of Ms. Michelle Barker-Helmer, chair of this memorial committee, and Mr. Munro's former deputy, we are able to honor him posthumously today. I am deeply grateful to her and to all who helped make this tribute possible. It is my great honor to present the Order of the Rising Sun gold race with neck ribbon by His Majesty the Emperor of Japan to the Honorable Ralph Davis Munro. 日本国天皇はアメリカ合衆国人ラルフ・デイビス・マンローに旭日中綬章を贈与する。皇居において辞をさせる。令和4年11月3日、内閣総理大臣岸田文雄、内閣府将軍局長小野田博夢。The Emperor of Japan does hereby confer upon Ralph Davis Munro of the United States of America the Order of the Rising Sun, gold race with neck ribbon. In witness thereof, the seal of state has been affixed at the Imperial Palace. The third day, the 11th month, the fourth year of Reiwa, Prime Minister Kishida Fumio, Director General of Decoration Bureau, Cabinet Office, Onoda Hiromu.
Thank you, Consul General. It is now my honor to welcome Washington's 15th Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, who will offer the eulogy.
Right now, I'm so glad Lieutenant Governor Heck is here because he's the only elected official in the room that cries more than I do at things like this. So I think I'm good. All right. Listening to today's stories of leadership and compassion, we get a better sense of the extraordinary life of Ralph Davis Munro. Get the emotion out in the beginning, hopefully. George and Karen, thank you. Thank you for your support of Ralph, because what you gave up
with family time and doing things like walking in parades, we know led to his success and his many accomplishments. And we know that he would not have been able to do the things he did for our state and our country and our world if it hadn't been for you. So thank you very, very much. All right, hopefully got that out of my system. All right. Ralph loved to connect people, connect them to their history, to their state, and to each other. I loved it when he would get that twinkle in his eye as he started a formal speech and he told a corny joke, or he would say that thing everyone in the room was thinking, but no one thought was appropriate to say out loud. He was gregarious and always quick to direct the audience's attention away from himself and onto the most important people in the room, the kids, the volunteers who made the event possible, the servers who had just brought out dinner. He loved to make us laugh and find joy in whatever activity or task we were undertaking. From preparing and serving meals at the Salvation Army to planting daffodils along the Ralph Munro Trail with McLean elementary school students, Ralph was there making sure you had fun doing the important work at hand. He was a teacher who loved to share Washington state history and help us see the importance of preserving that which makes our state great. My best day with Ralph Munro was spent driving from Olympia to Kennewick in 2011. The highlight of that trip came when we stopped at the Laurel Hill Memorial Park in Cle Elum. As he set a bouquet of flowers at the base of the flagpole, Ralph explained that he did this every time he came through town to honor Mike Cooley. Mike was the boyhood friend of Douglas Albert Munro, the only Coast Guard member to receive the Medal of Honor. Cooley dedicated himself to raising and lowering the flag every day for 30 years and never missed a single day. And Ralph never missed a chance to pay tribute to him. That day, Ralph was my personal historian, whose storytelling made me feel part of Washington State's heritage. I'm so thankful he made the series My Favorite Places with the crew from TVW, giving you guys a shout out, so everyone can see our state through Ralph's eyes. He was, of course, a proud Scot. Whether he was being sworn into office wearing his kilt or leading the pipe band in a parade, Ralph was there with Karen and George proudly wearing their kilts and walking down Main Street. That was Ralph, passing cultural pride onto his son, so one day his grandson, John, would also proudly display the family tartan in front of his community. We would be here well past midnight if I tried to read the laundry list of major accomplishments by Ralph in his 81 years on planet Earth, including 5 terms as Secretary of State. The foundation for these accomplishments was, of course, family. Ralph's grandfather, Alexander Mackenzie Munro, was a gifted stonemason. He arrived in America from Scotland in 1887 and made his way to the Northwest. At nearly 6 feet tall, Alexander had broad shoulders, strong hands, a keen mind, and a ruddy Celtic complexion. Who does that remind us of? Alexander was a lucky man. In Seattle, thousands of miles from their ancestral homes, he married another Scottish immigrant, Janet Montgomery. Janet was an uncommonly bright and brave young woman. When Alexander beckoned her to join him in America, she packed her meager bag. Wed in 1890, they settled on Bainbridge Island and had 10 industrious children, including Ralph's father, who became an electrician at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard at Bremerton. Those of us fortunate enough to have toured this building with Ralph know that in the 1920s, Alexander Munro spent 5 years as the lead stonecutter on the new Capitol campus, notably this magnificent legislative building, where his grandson would rise to prominence as one of the most dedicated public servants in our state's history. Every day, Ralph was privileged to work here from 1966, literally in the basement, until his last as Secretary of State in 2001. He revered this building as a symbol of democracy and the promise of stewardship. Ralph carved his own remarkable legacy from the stones his grandfather set in place with such skill and devotion. This place, a magnificent monument to participatory democracy, is one of the cornerstones of Ralph Munro's eventful life. I remember walking these halls once with Ralph when I first was elected secretary, and he said, "Look at this place, Kim. It's way bigger than you. It's been here a long time before you got here, and it's going to be here a long time after you're here. Never confuse your title with your importance, and know that you are a steward of this office." And that was the best advice he could have given me, and I use it every single day. Those of us who remember the exuberance of Ralph's 75th birthday celebration just 7 years ago are also reminded that life can turn on a dime. One day you're laughing about your wild oats that you sowed in your first year of college. The next, seemingly in a flash, you're trying to escape your wheelchair. Fate played a cruel trick on such a vibrant man. Yet for Ralph, there was never bitterness. Frustration, yes, but no bitterness. He was always counting blessings. Ralph's remarkable life tells us, keep your I love yous up to date. Celebrate each day God gave you by striving to put service above self, the Rotary motto that Ralph regarded as words to live by as he helped eradicate polio in developing countries. Those of us who succeeded Ralph as Secretary of State were inspired by the example he set, the bi-partisan sense of civic duty he brought to the job from day one. His integrity and joviality made friends on both sides of the political aisle. There was a time where a few Republicans were very critical of Ralph for supporting and hosting a fundraiser for his friend, Congressman Norm Dix. But Ralph couldn't care less. He said that Norm is doing a great job for all of us, and he was proud of what he had done for his longtime friend, the Democrat from Bremerton. When I reflect back on that laundry list of Ralph's accomplishments, he gave us a roadmap to improve our world through inclusion, kindness, and compassion. Rather than voters having to track down a voter registrar at the fire station or a public library, Ralph designed and won passage for the state's motor voter law. It offered citizens the opportunity to get a registration when they got their driver's license, and it was passed 3 years before the Congress passed the National Voter Registration Act. Words like imbecile and idiot had been used to stigmatize our developmentally disabled citizens. Ralph persuaded legislators and voters to remove this archaic and offensive language from the voter qualification section of our state constitution. Together with First Lady Jean Gardner, Ralph chaired the 1989 Washington State Centennial, which developed thousands of projects to encourage citizens to recognize our state's heritage, its challenges, and its potential for the future. After the tumultuous 2000 presidential election, he served on the Carter-Baker Commission. The commission's report and recommendations to Congress resulted in passage of the Help America Vote Act in 2003. As we've heard, Ralph led many trade and cultural missions connecting Washington state leaders with their peers in Japan, China, and Korea, with a special emphasis on the Russian Far East. He also worked with Washington's indigenous people to protect their rights and preserve their sacred sites. And that is just a partial list of what Ralph was able to achieve. To bring this to a close, I've been brushing up on my Scottish proverbs, and this most classic one is, I know, one that Ralph loved. Unfortunately, I can't give it that Scottish lilt that he had, but I'll give it a shot. Lang may your loom reek. Literally means long may your chimney smoke, or more loosely translated, it means may you live long and keep well. Ralph Davies Munro lived long, although I think we all wish it could have been longer. And he could have had happier final days. one thing is certain, Ralph's fire for justice was much more than smoke. His legacy of compassion and inclusion will endure. And I know if he was here right now, he would have walked up 5 minutes ago and said, Kim, that's enough about me. Let's go, let's get on to the more important people. So with that, Secretary Munro, we will always remember you for how you made us feel. Thank you for everything you taught us, what you gave to us, and how you made us laugh, and mostly how you inspired us to love each other. I miss you. I love you. Godspeed, my friend.
Those are some really tough acts to follow. Beautiful. So my name's Christy Stahl, and I'm Ralph's daughter. As many of you know, I was adopted at birth and raised in Bothell, Washington by two wonderful parents, Bob and Jeanette Parrott. Mom's here. And it's funny, when you're adopted, the first question is always, do you ever want to find your real parents? And I would say, well, I have real parents, Bob and Jeanette Parrott. And the answer was always no. I had a great life growing up. I had everything I needed to be successful. A home, food, clothes, vacations, activities, but most importantly, I had love. And because of that, I never had a burning desire or a burning curiosity to find out who my biological parents were. But after my dad passed away, something shifted, and I started thinking about how short life really is. I realized that if I really wanted to know where I came from, then I should probably find out sooner rather than later. So in 2021, I bought an Ancestry.com kit, and I spit in a tube, put it in the mail, sent it back in, and a few months later, I get a text on my phone saying my results were in. I pulled up the app, and the first name that came up was Ralph Munro, parent-child match, which was a little bit surprising to me because that when you're adopted, you kind of expect a mom. You rarely expect a dad. And in this day and age, it's a little bit risky for men to do DNA tests. You never know what kind of surprises you're going to get. Ask Ralph. But I was curious, so I immediately, of course, went to social media because that's where I do all my important research. And the first name again to come up was Ralph Munro, Secretary of State. Well, I laughed and I skipped by that one because there's no way I could be that lucky. Based on the stories, the horror stories I'd heard from others who had found birth parents, I had set my bar really low. Because, yeah, there just is a lot of stories out there, and I didn't want to get my hopes up. But even if I had found a parent who was struggling, that would have been okay, because that's what I was emotionally prepared for. But what I wasn't prepared for was the possibility that my biological parent might have lived a life of extraordinary public service. I kept searching for other Ralph Munros. Surprisingly, there's not a lot. And I will admit that I did not know who Ralph Munro, Secretary of State, was. I mean, he was Secretary of State all my years growing up. I probably came to the Capitol when he was Secretary of State on a school trip, but I didn't know who he was, and I decided to go back to Ralph Munro, Secretary of State, just out of curiosity. And I started reading. And the more I read, the more awestruck I became. Environmental activist, ending whale captures, eradicating polio, welcoming Vietnam refugees when no one else would, and then the cool thing, being friends with the people who invented pickleball. I love pickleball, so that was really darn cool to me. And if it were true, literally the Forrest Gump of biological fathers, because he seemed to have a hand in everything. But that's not what made, all of those things are so admirable and amazing, but that's not what made him a rock star to me. What truly stopped me in my tracks was his lifelong work on behalf of people with disabilities. You see, I had just spent the last 6 years working with children and adults with autism. So to suddenly discover that this stranger, who might be my father, had spent his life serving the same community was a little bit surreal. Even more powerful was Ralph. By all accounts, Ralph didn't seem to have a personal connection driving his advocacy. Oftentimes, we see parents, we see caregivers, we see people who have a child or a loved one. They have that personal connection, and Ralph didn't. He did the work simply because it was the right thing to do, and he wanted to make the world a better place for those who need us most. So even if we ended up not being related, Ralph would have still been a hero in my eyes, just based on what I had read. His journey into this work started with a simple act of kindness, volunteering at a Christmas party for children with disabilities on the Virginia 5. And that's where he met Terry Sullivan, a nonverbal 7-year-old boy. That moment led him to the Fircrest School, where he became a dedicated volunteer. And he wasn't just a casual volunteer either. He showed up before and after work every day, missing just 9 days in 2 years. It was at Fircrest that he met Governor Dan Evans. Later that same day, while catering an event, Ralph saw him again because Dan mentioned him in the speech that he was giving at the event that night. And that moment sparked a partnership and a friendship that would last a lifetime. Ralph became a trusted advisor and eventually Washington Secretary of State. Over the next 50 years, he used that platform to create lasting change, all starting from one unexpected moment, proof that even the smallest act sparked by a little boy named Terry can change everything. Terry's here today, and I just would like to recognize him because I feel like without Terry, we may not be here today. Ralph talked about Terry often and about how proud he was of him and how much he loved him. So, in 1971, Ralph helped pass the Washington Educationer for All Act, working alongside four fierce mothers, Katie Dolan, Janet Taggart, Pat Nellie, and Maggie Maybe. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Washington became the first state to guarantee public education for children with disabilities. That law eventually became the model for the federal Individuals with Disability Act that we have today. So if anybody out here works in a school and works in special education especially, every day you see those children, those ones who have extreme behaviors either due to a disability or trauma, who back in the day would never have been allowed to go to school. They would have been kicked out. And because in schools, they just don't have the resources to take care of those kids, but now they have a right. And thanks to Ralph and these four courageous women, millions of children now have the right to learn and grow alongside their peers. In 1973, Ralph led efforts to require curb cuts, ramps, and wider doors for wheelchair users. Last year, Ralph and I were in downtown Seattle, navigating his wheelchair along the streets, and Ralph talked about how proud he was to play a part in making the city more accessible for everyone. That same year, he expanded the state's Equal Rights Amendment to include protections for people with sensory, mental, and physical disabilities. In 1977, he helped open Olympia's first group home and respite center. So at the time, there was about 40 group homes in the state. And despite community protests, they were able to open these two homes. So the two homes were going into just regular neighborhoods. And the people in those neighborhoods were worried that if someone who had a disability was living next door to them, it would lower their property values. They said they were okay with it, but just not in their neighborhood. And it's still hard to believe that people used to think like that. But Ralph didn't do what was popular. He did what was right. He believed people with disabilities deserved real homes and real communities. He wanted to take people out of institutions, and Terry was a recipient of that hard work and was one of the first children to be removed from a institution and enter a real home. In 1979, he led the Referendum 37 campaign, securing $25 million for housing and job training, especially for kids and adults with disability. So $25 million is a humongous amount today for these services. What a win for back then, and Ralph made that happen. And like Kim said, in 1988, he fought to remove offensive language from the state's competition. The words idiots, imbeciles, and defective youth. As the bill explained, those words came from a time when people with disabilities were seen as less than fully human, when ignorance and prejudice were etched into law. Ralph believed our Constitution should reflect our shared values, and that even a small change in wording could mean the world to thousands of Washingtonians. That was the kind of leader Ralph was. Someone who saw both the symbolic and the human stakes, and never hesitated to act for those left on the margins. His passing is an enormous loss, especially to the disability community, because he didn't just preach diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI as most of us know it. He lived those values. Yet even the strongest champions can't finish the job alone, and the struggle he embraced is still with us. Families continue to battle for services they can't find, cling to the few they have, and too often feel unheard or unseen, because people with disabilities are still overlooked in most DEI conversations. Respite care and special needs daycare, the programs that Ralph fought for, remain scarce. Caregivers continue to fight for desperately needed services for their loved ones. They lose sleep, are forced to quit their jobs, and oftentimes slip into poverty. Because the hard truth is that there aren't enough Ralph Munros to stand beside every family, even though everyone deserves an ally who sees them, speaks up, and never quits. To say that being Ralph's daughter is one of the greatest honors of my life is an understatement. He made the world better for people with disabilities and for countless others, not just in Washington, not just in the United States, but across the world. And his life still inspires all who believe in dignity, inclusion, and justice. My only regret is I wish we would have had more time together, that his final years would have been kinder, and that he could have met my dad, because they were both amazing people, and they would have really, really liked each other. And my dad would have loved this story. Yet my gratitude outweighs regret. Because of Ralph, I now have a brother who's very kind and funny and smart, a little bit bossy, but that's okay. And I have an extended family, a new extended family. Laura, John, Lachlan, Michelle, Clark, Cindy, Karen, Liz, and so many more that I've met along the way. Thank you so much for being so kind to me. To everyone filling this Capitol today, a place where Ralph cherished, thank you. Whether you knew him as a mentor, a colleague, a friend, or family, your presence testifies to the lives he touched. Ralph never clung to titles. He used them to build bridges, lift others, and reshape our world. His legacy lives on in the rights we now take for granted and in the countless lives made better because he cared enough to act. He was a visionary, a humanitarian, a diplomat, and my greatest surprise, a father. Celebrating him is an honor beyond words. So thank you for coming, for honoring his life, and for helping carry his legacy forward. Let's keep doing the work, walking the walk, and standing up for what's right, just like Ralph did. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You know, listening to all this, I'm thinking about the 6 degrees of separation, how the connections that we made. And so I have a special needs son. So thank you. It was rough for our family, but because Ralph did what he did, my child was able to flourish with all the other kids, the public schools, and now he works at Boeing, and he's doing really well, and that we owe it to Ralph. And in the 70s, when I was in elementary school at Lake Stevens, we were paired up with refugee kids. Cy and Bick, who I was paired up with, they have a good life because of your father. So all these connections. Secretary Wyman, you had mentioned how Ralph got slammed pretty hard for putting on a fundraiser for a Democrat. So as a Democrat, I don't feel so bad for putting on a fundraiser for a Republican state senator. So if I get any flack from it, I'm going to let my party leadership know, well, Ralph did it, so I can too. So I do want to thank some folks who assisted with all this, including members of the Munro family, Ralph and my staff, and the Highlander bagpipers, the pianist George Campling, and personnel from the Department of Enterprise Services to work on this Saturday, thank you so much, who assisted with this memorial. As you exit the rotunda, there will be seedling trees for you to take home and plant. Please accept one per family and plant it in the memory of Ralph Munro. Now, please stand for the closing prayer and join us in the singing of America.
What an incredible afternoon. In my faith tradition, there is a phrase, comes from a story of Jesus, when people who have spent their lives on behalf of others, God welcomes them back. Jesus, God with skin on it, and says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Ralph, well done, good and faithful servant. That we heard fully the difference that he made. And now, people who have gathered here, it's our turn. It's our turn that we've heard in so many ways to carry the legacy, the baton, the fire to all the places that we have been put. We might not all be Ralph Munros, but we all matter, and only together can we see Ralph's vision of Washington come to fruition. So with that, I'll read one of my favorite poems as our benediction as we go from here. Whatever faith tradition you hold dear, substitute in a name if you need to. But for me, it's Jesus the Christ. Christ has no body but yours. No hands, no feet on earth, but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands. Yours are the feet. Yours are the eyes. You are his body. You are God's love in the communities to which we go. Let me pray. God, be with us as we go. Give us the strength and courage to carry on what you started through Ralph. Help us to love sacrificially, to see injustice and to act, to see hurting and to do something, whether so small or so large. God, be with us in it all. As we go from here, help us to love one another across all lines that are meant to divide as one community for all. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
This was one of Ralph's favorite songs. After I have sung the verses, please join me in singing the first verse again together for Ralph. My country, tears of the sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. My native country, the land of the noble free, thy name I love. I love thy rocks and rills, thy woods and temple hills, my heart with rapture thrills like that above. Let music swell the breeze and ring from all the sweet freedom's song. Let mortal tongues awake, let all that breathe partake, let rocks their silence break, the sound prolong. Thy safeguard liberty, the school shall ever be our nation's pride. No tyrant hand shall smite, while with encircling might all here are taught the right with truth allied. Now join me. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountain side, let freedom